The 20th anniversary celebration of the Georgia Public Policy Foundation, and a special award to a great friend tonight. I've been told that 5 of your fraternity brothers are here tonight. That's not a good thing. David Ullman is going to come up on stage now to present our invocation. David is a current member of the Board of Trustees and a founding board member, and he's the founder and chairman of Regent Partners. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Ullman.
Let us pray. Sovereign God, we come tonight to celebrate the uplifting and redemptive work of Georgia Public Policy Foundation and its leaders, and to honor an individual who has served this organization in this state in remarkable fashion. We're thankful for the 20 fruitful years of GPPF and its commitment to principles and policies that enable families and communities all across this state to flourish. As we pray for our republic and our state and our leaders, may we be reminded by you to view our politics through the lens of our faith rather than our faith through the lens of our politics. And remind us, Lord, that to truly change our culture, more than just through wise leaders and prudent public policies, we must individually embody your faithful presence in our daily lives, in our families, in our community, in business and civic lives, in private and in public. May you enable this organization to continue to help this state become like the city set on a hill, shining brightly for others to see, showering liberty and prosperity on its citizens, and bringing glory to you. May all we say and do here tonight be pleasing to you, Father. Please bless our time together. Bless this organization. Bless Rogers Wade, and bless this great state. It is in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, David. Please welcome Gordon Beckham.
Kelly McCutcheon asked me to provide a family perspective on the formation of the Georgia Public Policy Foundation, and I'm pleased to do that. In the late 80s and early 90s, Dad became very interested in national policy and the influence of the traditional media on these matters. As part of this journey, he became acquainted with the business model of the Heritage Foundation, which is a national policy group based in Washington, D.C. The Heritage Foundation's leadership persuaded Dad that to a large extent, national policy was driven by the interests of the states. If you want to drive and shape the direction of a nation, he was told, first drive and shape the interest of the state. At that time, there were a number of disparate organizations in the state of Georgia, but none of them shared the values that had made Dad successful or that he was inclined to promote. For those of you who know Dad, you would not be surprised at how he chose to proceed. There was a gap in his mind, and he moved to fill it by himself, forming the Georgia Public Policy Foundation, a nonpartisan, independent, market-oriented policy group. I heard him say many times that if the truth was presented to Georgians, Georgia would follow the right path. It's heartening to declare this evening that the values on which he founded the organization, economic freedom, limited government, personal responsibility, individual initiative, and respect for the rule of law, are more fervently guarded by the foundation today than they were 20 years ago. While he started it, the foundation exists today only through your active participation, your enlightened self-interest, and your generous benevolence. And I would think you would agree that there's never been a time in the history of our nation when the truth and a subsequent course direction were so desperately needed. Many thanks for all you do, and Godspeed.
I'd like to say a few words now about the Georgia Public Policy Foundation because it plays such an incredibly important role in our state. The Public Policy Foundation was established, as many of you know, in the fall of 1991 as a 501c3 nonprofit research institute with the purpose of conducting scholarly research and analysis of Georgia public policy issues, providing education for Georgia citizens, policymakers, and the media. It is a state-focused think tank. The mission is to be the most respected and influential source of public policy research and education in the state of Georgia. And the philosophy is pretty simple. Believing that good public policy is based upon fact, an understanding of sound economic principles, and the core principles of our free enterprise system: economic freedom, limited government, personal responsibility, individual initiative, respect for private property, and the rule of law. The foundation is guided by two principles: no attack of individuals, focusing on ideas, and making sure the facts are correct. Even the smallest, seemingly inconsequential typo can undermine our credibility. Someone once asked the president and CEO of the Policy Foundation, Kelly McCutcheon, "What's the goal of the Public Policy Foundation?" And he said very simply, "We want to change the world." I would add, for the better. The ideas that are developed at the Public Policy Foundation and here in Georgia can change the world. Of course, the ideas are based on the most powerful ideas of freedom. Freedom motivated by our founding fathers to risk their life, liberty, and sacred honor during the Revolution. Freedom tore down the Berlin Wall. And today, freedom is motivating the Arab Spring in the Middle East. And so we can change the world and change lives. Reforming welfare in the 1990s was a great success, but that idea started at the state level in Wisconsin. What happens here in Georgia impacts the nation, and the actions of the United States of America clearly impact the rest of the world. And that's why the work that is done at the Georgia Public Policy Foundation is very important, and why we are grateful to all of you for participating, supporting, and investing in the Georgia Public Policy Foundation. And so the foundation has been getting the facts right about Georgia policy issues for 20 years. Taxes, healthcare, education, transportation, public policy in Georgia, contributing to the betterment of our lives in our state, not just some, but all of our citizens. And I hope you'll continue to support the work of the Georgia Public Policy Foundation in providing facts and figures to our elected officials and public at large. And so to Kelly and to Benita and to Mike and the rest of the staff, thank you for what you do. Thank you very much. And a friend of ours, a friend of mine, a friend to the Georgia Public Policy Foundation, Clyde Tuggle, a senior vice president, and I'd like him to come up to say a few words. And while he's coming up here, I just want to say thank you, Clyde, for all you and Coca-Cola do for the Georgia Public Policy Foundation. Clyde Tuggle.
Good evening, Governor and Mrs. Deal, Senator Isaacson, distinguished guest. Craig, I was going to say that, we talked about that financial kicker that was in this place this evening if you finished before 9 o'clock. So I'm not going to give you the details. It falls to me to take a few minutes really on behalf of all the sponsors this evening and friends of Rogers and the Georgia Public Policy Foundation to say a word of thanks. At Coca-Cola, of course, this is a relationship that goes back many years, and there are so many people in this room that are connected to the intersection of this great institution and Rogers and Coca-Cola. But there are, I think, a number of people who aren't here, who I think are worthy of being mentioned. One person I do have to mention is our dear friend, the late Ovid Davis. And I mention Ovid because Ovid, I know, was a mentor of yours, Roger. He was a mentor of mine. He was a mentor of many of my colleagues here at Coca-Cola. He was a friend of many of you in this room. And the reason that I miss I miss Ovid tonight. You really don't even look that much alike. The reason I miss Ovid tonight is because he probably is the only one who would have had the courage to get up here and tell a really embarrassing story about something that you screwed up immensely. But maybe there'll be others. Since 1991, the Georgia Public Policy Foundation has given fair, independent, and credible analysis to all of us. The ability to carve out a role for objective, nonpartisan analysis in an era of dueling agendas and factual flexibility is testimony to the excellent work of a top-flight staff of professionals, and their effectiveness reflects outstanding leadership of valued colleague and good friend Rogers Wade. Too often, the term opinion leader goes to those who shout the loudest. But Rogers' position as a leader of opinion rests on speaking with insight, perspective, and hard-earned trust. Put simply, I would say, as many of you, that we've learned much from Rogers Wade. Along the way, Rogers taught me no more important lesson, perhaps, than the understanding that government affairs is not really about creating opinion on specific issues. Instead, it's really the default setting for community connection. It's also the understanding that the well-being of our communities and the strength of our businesses are a single issue. One can't advance one without the other. Good public policy is, again, quite simply put, good business. And the enlightened policy that brings together company and community is not a zero-sum game. There are truly win-win situations where everyone benefits. Common sense isn't always common. Common ground isn't always easy to achieve. Consensus isn't always easy to find. And yet, for 2 decades, the Georgia Public Policy Foundation and Rogers have succeeded again and again in helping our state find those 3 often elusive keys to progress. And the simple fact is that tonight we're better off as a result, as are the millions of Georgians unaware of the debt we all owe to this great man, Rogers Wade. Thank you.
Thank you, Clyde. What a great segue to the next portion of our evening. And we turn our focus very specifically now to the 2011 Freedom Award. And to introduce our video presentation, please welcome to the stage Will Ball, the former U.S. Secretary of the Navy, member of the Reagan administration, Chief of Staff to Senator Herman Talmadge, former CEO of the National Soft Drink Association, and close FOR, friend of Rogers.
FOR designation in my youth. If you'll forgive a personal reference, it was 36 years ago when a young naval officer decided to leave active duty and found himself fortunate enough to be offered a job by our guest of honor in the office of Senator Herman Talmadge. It took me a few months to figure out that it hadn't been Senator Talmadge's idea to offer me that job, which of course I had presumed was the case. But we worked hard in those days, and I was afflicted at the time with what a good friend of mine, Senator Howard Baker, referred to in his youth with the indiscretion sometimes comes with youthful enthusiasm. Senator Baker used to tell people when asked about some intemperate remarks he had made at one time that, well, he was a young man once, but he had recovered from that. It took me a while to recover from that, but one of the reasons I did was that there was a mentor for me there back in the late 1970s who, when I would come up with a questionable, unrealistic, somewhat nutty idea, who would have the courtliness and was such a gentleman that he would simply say, well, you, quote, might want to think about that. And I look out across this crowd and I see many, many people who I know whose lives have intersected those of Rogers Wade and who have encountered similar advice under very similar circumstances. Rogers is blessed with a gift of judgment, and as Clyde mentioned, Rogers has developed over many years the way to take an idea and ensure that the sometimes difficult path to making that a good idea is doable. And that is a talent, I can assure you, very much in short supply in Washington these days, and one that Rogers mastered at an early age. But my purpose here this evening is to introduce a first. And the first is the Georgia Public Policy Foundation, I don't believe in its history, Kelly, has ever produced a major documentary. And Kelly came up with this idea some months ago, and so quite naturally the staff reached out to major documentary filmmakers in Hollywood to recruit one willing to undertake this complex subject. Unfortunately, in the digital information age, word was out in Hollywood that the last time Rogers Wade actually paid for a movie ticket was to see George C. Scott play Patton in 1970. So despite our persuasive efforts, we were not able to recruit anyone from that profession to do this, what you're about to see. But nevertheless, the ever intrepid staff at the Georgia Public Policy Foundation has put together an exceptional video presentation.
Who is Rogers Wade? Well, it's sort of like the man himself. That's a large question. Rogers is a fairly large guy.
They say it's the people you meet, the books you read, and the choices you make. Those are the three things that shape your life. I'm just so lucky to have crossed paths with Rogers Wade.
He sort of looks like Santa Claus in a lot of respects. I'm not sure he like me saying that, but he does. But he's a person of integrity with a great sense of humor. Can't always repeat what he says, but he really just is a person that you come to count on. He's very much of a rock for a lot of people and a mentor.
Rogers is better than Google when it comes to Georgia, because you can't call up Larry Page and ask him what about Willacoochee, Georgia, who was Lance Futch and the famous mayor from Willacoochee, Georgia. But you can call Rogers and he'll know, and he'll tell you how that's connected.
And he likes to be in the shadows, so I presume he's probably going to be squirming right now when we're talking about him. But people need to know what he has meant to us as individuals, to the organizations he's been a part of, and to the state. He has been a big part of the success that all of us have had.
But he's a true public servant. I mean, we know his history with serving our nation, serving our state, but also serving those who serve, the men and women of the armed forces. And for that, USO is truly grateful.
There is one thing that Rogers may be a little suspect when it comes to integrity and truth, and I sort of hate to mention this, but he would have you believe that he's a great marksman and a great shooter of guns. I've been fortunate in a position to watch him on several hunting trips that we've been on in South Georgia and in South Carolina and Pennsylvania, and it's just, he's not as good as he thinks he is. That's the only flaw I've found in him, to be honest.
His primary legacy beyond marrying Marcia would be his behind-the-scenes architecture of Leadership Georgia, which is the premier program of its kind in the country. Leadership Georgia is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. And if you look through the directory, it's pretty much a who's who of Georgia. People have made a difference.
I would describe Rogers as a guy who is the center of the Georgia political universe. Rogers has been a part of all that this state has been since the 70s when Herman Talmadge's chief of staff.
Rogers was a trusted advisor to Senator Talmadge, and even to the point of trying to help him with some of his speech and delivery. And he said, "Senator, about this helicopter thing, you keep calling it a heliocopter, but really it's helicopter, Senator." And the senator took his cigar out and said, "Rogers, I've been to Germany. I've met the man who invented the damn thing, and he called it a heliocopter." And he poked his cigar back in, and that was the end of the story.
If you go down in the hallways in corporate Georgia right now, he could probably point out 4 people in every major company that are in executive level positions that interned for him for Senator Talmadge, and that he still knows and trusts and works with.
He has the ability to make friends with everybody and anybody that he ever saw. His infectious sense of irreverent humor, his ability to remember things, he's just the kind of guy that you like, trust, and want to know. And you, maybe in some ways, you want to be sure he knows you too.
When I was working at the foundation, I'd come in most afternoons about 4:30, and Rogers and I would sit there and talk about Georgia politics until 6 or 6:30. He knows how things happened in Georgia and who was involved in it and all the players. His love for history is such a tie to what is going on in Georgia politics today.
One of Rogers' greatest strengths, one of the things that he has built his entire career on, is he does his fact gathering before he expresses an opinion. When you're expressing an opinion or a thought, given his love of free enterprise, and you base it on the facts which he has personally researched, what is there to change your opinion? You're either right or you're wrong. And if he's got his facts right, he's right. So there is no wishy-washiness.
USO, or United Service Organizations, is the not-for-profit civilian organization that provides community support for the men and women of the armed forces. Rogers Wade has been a phenomenal board member for 25 years, and he's probably an unknown hero to the men and women of the armed forces because so many of his contributions are probably not known to the average serviceman or servicewoman. 20 years ago it was even difficult to get board members because we were just coming down from the Gulf War, the military were downsizing, and many people thought, oh, we're in an era of peace, and we were. And we just really didn't need them. Maybe we don't need the services. Rogers was there to say, yes, we still do. We have an all-volunteer army. They still have to have the troops ready and prepared for if there is a tragedy. And we know what happened after 2001. What I would like to say is, Rogers, congratulations, and I want to say to you, thank you on behalf of USO, but more importantly, the millions of men and women that are serving our country who don't know what you do for them through USO.
The mentoring of people is not always easy because when you're as experienced, Rogers, as he is, it takes patience to work some people through the system.
There has never been a time in my life where I haven't called Rogers for advice, asked him to get together, that he hasn't immediately dropped what he was doing, come met me for breakfast at the IHOP or the Waffle House.
And without him, I would not have found success. I would not have found really the ability to do what I do now, which is really a different whole world than I used to be in. But it's thank you for showing me a whole other world out there and also teaching me to be a better person.
If Rogers walked into the room, you would expect some laughing soon because he's going to touch somebody's funny button within the first few minutes. That's just his personality. He's got an anecdote, he's got a story, he's got a quip, but he's going to get you laughing to set you at ease. And that's why he himself could have been a great politician too if he had ever chosen to put his name on the ballot. Instead, he stayed behind the scenes and made some great politicians, some great leaders, elected officials for the state of Georgia and the country.
I cannot say enough good things about Rogers. It begins to be syrup if I talk too much, and I'm not going to do that. Old codger, old grumpy codger. I don't want to be too sweet to him. He might get a big head to match his belly.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome United States Senator Johnny Isakson to the stage.
You know, when I gave thought to what I would say tonight about Rogers, it became crystal clear to me there were three areas I wanted to cover very quickly but very succinctly. First is the T. Rogers Wade I know on a personal basis. Second is the T. Rogers Wade I know on a professional basis. And third is the legacy T. Rogers Wade leaves for Georgia, which few men or women could ever hope to obtain. On the personal basis, let me tell you, he married way over his head. Marcia Rogers is one of the most patient, kind, beautiful people I have ever known. Marcia's Wade. T. Rogers Wade could never have done so well as to marry Marcia. Marcia, you're a beautiful lady. Thank you for your contribution. Rogers, I've torn up all your fraternity brothers' stories they told me to tell. I'm not going to do that because you know far too many on me. But on a personal basis, let me just tell you, Rogers is a great guy. I'm not sure exactly when I first met Rogers, but it had something to do with a fish fry at the waterworks for Herman Talmadge, if I'm not mistaken. My father was a huge Herman Talmadge supporter and friend, and that's really how Rogers and I first got our connection. In fact, Herman Talmadge used to say when I got involved in politics as a Republican that I was a Talmadge Republican, whatever the heck that might be, I don't know. But I got to know Rogers early and often in my political career and came to respect his insight and his nurturing spirit that he had for others. You've heard already from Will Ball and others about how their careers began with Roger Wade's nurturing of them. Mine is the same way. On a personal basis, I would not be where I am today had it not been for my friendship and the relationship I have with Rogers Wade. Now let me get to the professional business for a second. As I came in tonight and I started seeing everybody that came in the room, you immediately saw Rogers Wade's legacy in terms of professionalism. Nathan, there's not a one of us here tonight that wouldn't be where we are if it wasn't for Rogers Wade. His insight, his understanding of our state, his ability to bring people together, his ability to be bipartisan in everything he does, not because he wants to be bipartisan, but because he wants to do what is right for Georgia. Think about it for a second. In the last 4 decades, whom else have you known in our state that has supported Republican governors and Democratic senators and Republican senators, has brought people together from all parties, from all races, from all philosophies, for what? Not for the betterment of Rogers Wade, but for the betterment of our state. Very few people professionally have done what Rogers Wade has done for our state, never asking for a penny in return, only asking for Georgia to be the great state Georgia can be. And lastly, Rogers' legacy. There's a poem that I like that goes something like this. I saw them tearing a building down, a gang of men in my hometown. With a heave and a ho and a yes, yes yell, they swung a beam and a sidewall fell. And I asked the foreman, are these men as skilled as the one you'd hire if you had to build? And they laughed and said, oh, no, not these. For the most common of neighbor is all I need, for I can destroy in a day or two what it takes a builder 10 years to do. In the career of Rogers Wade, he has built two great institutions in our state that will last long beyond all of us. Institutions that, because of his labor, his love, and his passion, serve our state well. Dink Neesmith mentioned one, and that's Leadership Georgia. An institution that has built over 40 years many of our state's leaders, has built an insight of our state, urban to rural, rural to urban, we would have never had were it not for Rogers Wade's leadership, his building of that institution. And then the Georgia Public Policy Foundation. I can tell you, as one who was in public life in the early 1970s and then the 80s and then the 90s and the year 2000, the Georgia Public Policy Institute is the institution that has brought about common sense, pragmatism, and realistic ideals for our state. No one in this state deserves more credit for the great institutions he has built than Rogers Wade has been doing, building Leadership Georgia and building the Georgia Public Policy Foundation. So tonight, on the occasion that the giver of the Freedom Award has so often given, I am honored to honor my friend Rogers Wade tonight, and honored to be at the place and time that he too receives the Freedom Award. Because it is great Georgians and great Americans like T. Rogers Wade and his wife Marcia that make the United States of America the greatest country on the face of this earth. May God bless Rogers, Marcia, and his family, and her family, and may God bless the United States of America, the greatest country on the face of this earth. God bless all of you.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, the governor of the great state of Georgia, Governor Nathan Deal.
Thank you and good evening. Senator Isaacson, distinguished members of the Public Policy Foundation of Georgia, and guests, I am indeed honored to be here. Johnny, I believe it was one of the Udalls who made a statement that is often quoted in Congress when debate and discussion prolongs itself, that everything that needs to be said has been said, just everybody hasn't said it. Well, it's my time to say it. I think tonight, as we honor Rogers Wade, we honor an individual who truly embodies what the Georgia Public Policy Foundation stands for. You know, we all get busy in our lives and our careers, but policy and the ideas and the facts and the research that goes behind policy is something that we all should depend upon. I was thinking about the famous statue of the thinker. You know, we live in a day and an age where we don't have time to think. It's an art to be able to think. And for those who have the ability to think deeply and to base their thoughts on research, which is what the Public Policy Foundation really does, they provide those of us who are in positions of responsibility the policies out of which that thinking originates. We're told we still live in the tail end of the information age. And if you're like me, you are bombarded with information. I think we may live more in the opinion age rather than the information age, because so much of what we hear is really not based on fact. It is based on opinion, whether it is talk radio, talk television, opinion columns in the newspapers, those that still survive, or whether it is the recent rage of bloggers, the great mystery world in which people supposedly think great thoughts but do not wish to be associated with those thoughts, and for great reason many times. But what Rogers and the Georgia Public Policy Foundation have done is to do the hard work, the research, find out what the facts really are, and then be able to present them in a nonpartisan way. Too often, facts become the object of what we call in Washington spin. And we hire people because they are masters at taking the facts and spinning them to the point that the facts say what somebody wants those facts to substantiate. The Public Policy Foundation and Rogers take the facts and simply state what the facts are, and then allow people to reach their own conclusion about the facts. But the great attribute that Rogers brings is one of experience. And I believe that if we want to define wisdom, wisdom is a combination of many talents. First of all, it is the ability to decipher the truth. But a lot of people can decipher the truth. They just don't know what to do with it when they decipher it. It takes the ability to translate facts and truth into action. And that is where wisdom comes from. Rogers, I am pleased that all 5 of the surviving members of your high school class, or of your fraternity rather, are here with us tonight. But it is age that sometimes brings wisdom. Not always, but sometimes. And Rogers is that rare accumulation of the ability to take facts, which he insists upon, as all good thinkers do. He then takes the facts, he applies them in the milieu of information, of experience, and of just pure living. And on that, gives good advice. That's one of the reasons that I selected him as one of the co-chairs of my transition team. And he gave me good advice. He even recommended Chris Comiskey. And that was indeed good advice. But his greatest impact will be, as has already been stated, by being a mentor, by being a counselor, by being a friend of people who have taken his advice and tried to put it into practice. The greatest legacy that anyone could ever have is not to have a bridge named for them, not to have a building, heaven help us, not a prison, is not to have things named for you. It's to have left an imprint on the lives of those with whom you came in contact, because it is that imprint that will be repeated through the generations. And that is truly what makes a great American and a great citizen, and certainly one deserving of the award tonight. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the most uncomfortable person in the room tonight, T. Rogers Wade. Rogers, if you'll stand over there, Kelly McCutcheon, the president and CEO, will unveil this painting. And I think Marcia may already have a place for it. Marcia may already have a place for that painting. And I'd like you, Marcia, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the stage as well, please. Please, Marcia Wade.
Marcia, for all those long nights while you were holding down the fort while Rogers was out saving the free world, we got a little something for you.
Rogers, I know you don't like doing this, but please come on over. I'll walk with you. I want to make sure he gets there and doesn't walk off the stage. Rogers Wade.
Thank you. Really rescue. Well, he's right about one thing. I don't like being here. But I wouldn't want to contradict my governor and say that I've got the last word, but I do. And I just want to thank everybody. Thank you all for being here. There are more people in this room that deserve an award than I do, and most of the people in this room are the reason that I have that one. So, Gordon, I want to thank you for what you said about Hank. We wouldn't be here if Hank hadn't been the person that had the vision put together and the integrity to keep it going and the inspiration to make all of us do things. There were a few people here that were here in the beginning of it, but mostly his inspiration and his guidance, and they went into things all over the world. Hank, I think it was his 70th birthday, we all went to a surprise party, which actually was a surprise to him, and there were people there from all over the world that were there to thank him for things he'd done. And when we started Tech High, at a very crucial moment, he provided the inspiration, the help, and the finances to make sure that it started. It would have never gotten off the ground without him. Clyde, I'll get you. Will knows that I have too many pictures and too many stories that I could probably do well to talk about. But Nathan, Johnny, there's no way that I can thank everybody for the kind of friendship, kind of leadership that these people are giving the state now. It's been my good fortune to have met and worked with a lot of very good people. And these are the best. Thanks for y'all being here. Thank you, Craig. But I would be very remiss if I didn't tell you that the real reason that this works is Kelly and Benita. They make it work, and they're the backbone of the organization, have been for years. And but what I would really be remiss in is if I didn't thank someone who's my friend, a guide, a mentor, and for almost 50 years, my wife, Marcia.
T. Rogers Wade. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a delightful evening. It's been my honor to be with you this evening. And Clyde, check your watch.